Look, Hezbollah has already indicated that if Israel is serious about going to war and initiating a large-scale strike against Hezbollah positions in Lebanon, that Hezbollah may very well preempt that Israeli action. So Hezbollah is monitoring things. I don't think Hezbollah is going to sit there and let Israel cock its fist and throw the first punch. I think when they see Israel do this, Hezbollah just hit them and the fight begins. This is a fight that will be unlike any fight that we've seen ever between Arabs and Israelis. First of all, the technology that's going to be brought to bear by both sides is devastating in terms of its lethality. And in the case of both sides, it's accuracy. So you're able to deliver precision strikes that are extraordinarily powerful in large quantities over a very small, relatively small area. So the way this fight's going to look like is that it's basically massive violence on both sides, and what one side's trying to do is get what's called fire suppression over the enemy. So if I'm firing everything I have at you, you're firing everything you have at me. What you're hoping is that at some point in time, as I'm firing, I'm going to hear the bullets going by my head, or I'm going to take one in my head and go down. But either way, I stop firing, I duck down, you keep firing. Now it's going to be much more difficult for me that I'm down here to raise back up and fire, because even if I raise back up and you don't shoot me, my fire is not going to be well-aimed fire. Meanwhile, you who have stayed up putting well-aimed fire down, that's how you get fire superiority, then fire supremacy. And then you suppress the enemy, and then you maneuver and you kill the enemy. They're going to be doing this at a operational and strategic level. Hezbollah is going to be trying to take out Israeli air bases, because Israel's big strike capabilities through the Air Force. And Israel is going to be moving its air assets back further into Israel. In the past, they believed that they could preserve their air assets because Hezbollah lacked the capacity to strike deep. Today, Hezbollah has that capacity. And so Israel is going to be bombing Hezbollah, hoping that they can attrit Hezbollah's long-range strike weapons before those long-range strike weapons are able to take out the totality of Israel's airfield. So it's a race against time, both sides trying to blow each other up. The side that strikes first is going to have an advantage. And so Hezbollah, I don't believe, is going to let Israel get in that first blow. As soon as they detect Israel preparing for that, they will initiate this. Meanwhile, while they're doing this great strategy of blowing the hell out of each other, Israel's going to launch a massive invasion of southern Lebanon, the goal of which is to push Hezbollah out of the border area past the Litani River, which is a river that's about 18, 20 kilometers, to the north. Hezbollah's not going to do that fight. First of all, Hezbollah is dug in, so it's going to be impossible for the Israelis to get them out. Meanwhile, Hezbollah has said, if you do that, we're taking the fight to you, which means that tens of thousands of Hezbollah's highly trained forces are going to show up in northern Israel. Hezbollah has said we can take the Galilee. They can isolate the Golan Heights. The number of Israeli dead are going to be mind-boggling, because, again, this is going to be the kind of war that Israel just hasn't prepared for. They're not working. And I agree with Magus. Look, Hezbollah has been studying the Israelis for a long time. They have a whole bunch of weapons that Israel doesn't know anything about. And some of these weapons include anti-air weapons. So I think Israel is going to lose some aircraft as they press home their attack. And I think Israel is going to lose some ships. And if the United States wants to get involved, the United States may lose some ships. I think Hezbollah has advanced anti-ship weaponry that can reach out and strike well above the capabilities that the Houthi have displayed to date. I don't see Israel winning this thing. I don't see Israel walking away from this one. They're exhausted because of Gaza. Israeli generals have said already that the Israeli Defense Force cannot logistically sustain itself. They're out of spare parts. Their troops are exhausted. So if they do go to war against Hezbollah, I just think that you're going to see Hezbollah win a war of attrition and also win a qualitative fight. That Hezbollah is actually better at fighting on the ground than Israel is. And that's that. Now the question is, what will Israel do? Israel has, or at least is alleged to have, what they call the Samson option. The Samson option is if Israel's facing imminent physical destruction, that Israel will take out all of its Arab neighbors. Israel knows that if they do that, that's the end of Israel. One of two things will happen. One, it'll be abandoned by the United States and the West. And trust me, if Israel uses a nuclear weapon against the Arab states, we're done with Israel. But the other thing is that the Muslim world will not rest until a Muslim atomic weapon hits Israel and destroys Israel. So it's the end of Israel if they use nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons, they've only been used twice. We don't know what the impact of tactical nuclear weapons are. Back in the Cold War, we used to have something called SATMs, something atomic demolition munitions. I forget what the S stands for. But basically, they're backpack nukes, and our special forces teams had them. And their job was to get into the rear area of the Warsaw Pact and put these in a culvert or near a bridge or some defining territory, piece of terrain, and blow them up, creating a giant crater or destroying bridges or whatever. But one of the things that they found when they were doing the modeling is that special atomic. Thanks. Doing the modeling of these weapons is that hills and things like that sort of complicated things. That just because you had a nuclear weapon and it went off didn't mean that it was going to achieve the physical destruction you wanted it to achieve. Israel using tactical nuclear weapons, they haven't used them. Israel doesn't have a nuclear testing program. They can theorize about what yield they're going to get, but they don't know. So Israel may not achieve what they want if they just start with tactical nukes against southern Lebanon. So it's a foolhardy move. But again, this is why you see such pushback by the Israeli Defense Force against attacking Hezbollah, because they have thought through all this. They know what their nuclear plans are. They know what can trigger it, and they know that once they initiate, there's a good chance that things are going to deteriorate to the point that Israel's nuclear deterrence plan becomes a option for a prime minister to consider. And that's the end of Israel, and I don't think the Israeli generals want that. So I see a lot of pushback against Netanyahu's plans to launch a military strike against Hezbollah. If he does, it'll be the end of Israel. That's my assessment.
John from Michigan has a question, and that question is, what is the likelihood of an all-out war between Israel and Hezbollah? Is it inevitable for Israel to shift the focus towards the north, considering escalating responses?
Well, here's again the problem with the framing of that question. Why is there a problem on the northern border with Israel? Could it be that Israel is committing genocide against the citizens of Hamas, and that Hezbollah has said that as long as that happens, they will maintain pressure on Israel? The best way to make the Hezbollah pressure go away is for Israel to stop committing genocide, to buy into a ceasefire, to get the hostages exchanged, to start working towards a non-military solution to the problem. That's the best way to do it. And gosh, it's sort of amazing. Naftali Bennett, who I'm not a big fan of, former prime minister of Israel, former Israeli commando, the man who's perhaps most infamously known for his role in calling in artillery strikes on refugees. They were hunkered down in a UN base, killing scores of them. Naftali Bennett's come out and said the truth, that there's no need to be going to war against Lebanon, against Hezbollah. This is stupidity beyond belief. This is purely done to promote Benjamin Netanyahu as a wartime leader, to secure his war cabinet, and to keep Benjamin Netanyahu in power. He also says it's stupid to talk about militarily defeating Hamas. It can't happen. It won't happen. And that the best way is to try and deal with the reality of Hamas as it is by bringing about a ceasefire and beginning negotiations that hopefully in doing so will allow Israel to rebuild some of the tattered relationships it has around the world. Maybe by rebuilding these relationships, they can seek to contain Hamas, isolate Hamas, and maybe compel Hamas to start seeking compromise solutions that don't require Israel to bleed to death in Gaza. So the conflict is not inevitable because the conflict doesn't need to take place. This is the dumbest war in the world. It's only inevitable if Israel buys off on Benjamin Netanyahu's inevitability. So if Netanyahu is going to continue to be the prime minister, then you will probably have a full-scale war with Hezbollah, but that will be the end of Israel. Israel can't win that war. Moreover, that's a war that will likely result in the destruction of Israel, especially if Iran joins in. Although, given the recent election right now, it appears that the moderate Pezeshkian, I'm sure I'm butchering that name, is the winner. And, he has talked about improving relations with the West, etc. So maybe he will alter Iran's deterrent posture that was put in place by his predecessor, Ibrahim Raisi, where it said if Israel crosses red lines, the counter will be immediate and massive attack. We have to see. Everybody calls him a moderate and all that stuff, but remember, he has links to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Command. He's not, some peacenik. He's just moderate when compared to Saeed Jalili, the former nuclear negotiator who was very hardliner. But we'll see. I mean, the region's in turmoil. But the bottom line is Israel gains nothing. Israel as a nation state gains nothing by going to war against Hezbollah. And increasingly, all Israelis recognize this, except for the fanatic followers of Benjamin Netanyahu who need a war and the expansion of war in order to keep him in place as a war leader.
All right. The next question is from Reed Davis in Eugene, Oregon. I have been wondering why Iran and Hezbollah haven't got better security to prevent their top people from being assassinated. Both are using some of the most sophisticated technology when it comes to weaponry, and yet they cannot prevent the Zionists from mowing their leadership grass.
Well, first of all, rather than let's focus on the so-called incompetence of Iran and Hezbollah, why don't we acknowledge that the Israelis are pretty good at doing certain things, and assassinations appears to be something that they have become quite skilled at. The Israelis had a major presence in southern Lebanon. I just want to remind people where Hezbollah is from, southern Lebanon. And the Israelis were there from 1982 up until 2000. So 18 years. And if you don't think that the Shin Bet and Mossad and other Israeli security agencies didn't groom long-term stay-behind assets, then you know nothing about how Israel works. So there are a lot of Israeli resources in southern Lebanon. Hezbollah has some success in rooting them out. Hezbollah has lesser success in rooting others out. And there are resources there that are solely tasked with identifying, tracking, and reporting the location of senior Hezbollah leadership. And as a result, no matter what Hezbollah does, eventually some of them are going to be detected, and that's going to be communicated back, and the Israelis are right there across the border, able to use dedicated resources, drones, artillery shells, etc., to take these guys out. Same thing with Iran. Iran has, any number of societal fractures. When I was doing the Iraq thing as a weapons inspector, what I found out is that the favorite resource of almost every foreign intelligence service in the world in Iraq were the Kurds, because the Kurds were everywhere. They were in Baghdad. They were the taxi drivers, shop owners. They were there. but the Kurds also were in the north, in a zone that was outside of the control of Iraq. And so the CIA, MI6, Mossad were all up north, creating relationships with Kurdish families that had relatives in Baghdad and were able to extend their tentacles into Baghdad. And as a result, information could be collected. And if that information was actionable, then decisions could be made. And the Kurds could be used then to spin off, other networks amongst Christians or amongst, Shia or amongst Sunni tribes who have been somehow alienated by Saddam. But the Kurds became the conduit to make these other things happen. Iran is the same way. You have Kurds, you have Arabs, you have Azeris, you have Baluch, you have the Arabs, all of whom are Iranian, all of whom have a presence in Tehran, all of them have presence throughout Iran. They're shop owners, they're taxi drivers, they're businessmen, they're low-level functionaries. They're all over the place, and the CIA and foreign intelligence services and the Mossad all work with them. There's a reason why the Mossad's still in northern Iraq, because they're working with the Kurds of Iran who come over and coordinate closely with the Kurds of Iraq, and they're able to insinuate themselves there. They also work with the Mujahideen al-Khalq, which is a very powerful anti-theocratic group that's been around since the 1970s. And they use them to, and the MEK is very good at insinuating itself into Iraqi society. They do so in a way that makes it virtually impossible for them to be detected. And so when you have these people there scouting things out inside institutions, they locate, they identify somebody, his position, then they find out where he lives. They do the pattern of life evaluation. They find out the weakness. They identify a window of opportunity. And then the Israelis put together a plan of action that has the guy being taken out. It's just the reality of life. It's a contest. The Iranians are rolling up Israeli networks. The Israelis seek to reconstitute these networks. Hezbollah rolls up Israeli networks. They reconstitute. But what we can say is, despite the fact that these assassinations are taking place, Israel's not winning. I mean, so the implication that either Hezbollah or Iran has been fatally injured by any of this assassination is absurd. The programs that they have are continue, and it's the way the world works. It's a dirty business, and Israel's good at it, but not that good, because killing somebody is easy. Killing the right guy in a way that stops a program, that's a more difficult thing. And Israel has never stopped any Iranian program and any Hezbollah program. So they've sort of failed in their ultimate objective.
H-bar in the UK, Israeli media is reporting serious manpower crisis, and many Israeli officers are leaving. Why is it officers can leave? What does this crisis mean for Israel versus Gaza, Lebanon, and the U.S.?
I'm not familiar with Israeli law. In the United States, we would implement in times of war something called stopgap. Basically, if your enlistment was coming up or your commission was expiring, no, it isn't. You've been stopgapped. You're staying in until the conflict is over. I could imagine Israel might have similar legislation, but maybe they don't. The Israelis are a nation where they have to pay attention to the will of the people. And I don't know, Mark, if they have nuclear howitzer shells. That's a very specialized a munition that might be, again, without a testing program, they may not may not have those. I think their nukes are primarily confined to being on the warheads of Jericho missiles. They might have some on cruise missiles that are on board submarines, and then airdrop munitions. But I don't know if they have the artillery shells. But damn it.
Is that your Joe Biden impression?
That's my Joe Biden impression. Where was I before I got diverted by the nuclear bomb? I was talking about, stopgap. The Israelis are sensitive to their reservists. I would imagine that in Israel, if your enlistment's up, unless you've joined a reserve unit and have been called up, you're done. You get to leave. And I would imagine that if you're a reservist who's been called up, remember that this war has been going on for some time now. And, reservists, get called up for a specific, in the United States, they get called up for, 180 days. Then it takes an act of Congress to go beyond that. So I would imagine as people's, terms of service expire, that they can leave, and that many Israeli officers are opting to. They may have served in Gaza, and now their reserve time is done, and they're just getting the hell out of Dodge. But the one thing we know about the Israelis is that they are assigned to reserve units, and if they get called up, what we saw, love them or hate them, it doesn't matter. But when the call out went for Israel's reserves to be mobilized, there were thousands of Israelis in Europe on vacation, around the world on vacation. And instead of just running from an unpopular war, they all got on airplanes and came back to Israel to fulfill their duties. So, even though an officer may leave, I don't know if they're at the point now where there's widespread dissension and thousands of people are saying, I refuse to serve. I don't know if they're there yet. So we'll see.
Is a child protected area. Slow down less than 30 kilometers.